physics,
biology,
football,
science.
So how does the brain work then?
I think I'll swing naked on a wrecking ball and sing this song about evolution.
Wow, that's wrong.
it's a mind-boggling idea, isn't it?
I don't want to live in a universe like that, it's freaking me out.
Get creative, have fun with it, and get your stories out there.
Hi, I'm Brian Cox.
I'm Adam Spencer.
I'm Karen Bondar, and you are watching RIAus TV,
Australia's science channel.
Australia's Science Channel. Watch it. Constantly.
Welcome Australia, welcome South Australia, and to all our friends here in Adelaide at the RIAus studio, welcome to the 10th anniversary celebration of the Australian Science Media Centre, here in our wonderful home in Adelaide at the Australian Science Exchange. Could I thank the key supporters of this 10th anniversary event, the South Australian Government, Flinders University, the University of Adelaide, University of South Australia, the RIAus Australian Science Channel. Thank you to our special sponsors. I have a number of things I would like to say about the amazing 10-year journey of the Australian Science Media Centre. But could I begin by showcasing our latest development, SciMex, which we launched this year thanks to the support of the Federal Government's Inspiring Australia program.
Introducing SciMex, the breaking science news portal for Australia and New Zealand. In a speedy world of 24/7 news, a digital hub where scientists and journalists can rapidly exchange information. A place for journalists to access embargoed research, including from some of the world's best known and respected science journals. A place for scientists and organisations to showcase their expertise, pitch story ideas, and share research findings, images, and videos with the media. Presenting SciMex, the new digital portal that brings together science and the media.
Over the past 10 years, together with the RIAus, this Australian Science Exchange, home in Adelaide, has become a national icon, and it is the preeminent science communication centre in Australia. I would now like to introduce Alex Cook, who's representing another national icon, also homegrown in Australia, and likewise preeminent in his field of industry, science and innovation. I'd like to welcome Alex Cook, representing the Honourable Christopher Pyne.
Thank you, Peter. Your Excellency, the Honourable Hugh Van Lay, Governor of South Australia, the Honourable Susan Close MP, Minister for Education and Childhood Development, the Honourable Gail Gago, MLC, Minister for Science and Information Economy, Baroness Professor Susan Greenfield, CBE, AusSMC International Patron, Dr. Leanna Reid, Chief Scientist of South Australia, Mr. Peter Yates, Chair AusSMC, Dr. Susanna Elliott, CEO AusSMC, Professor Aidan Byrne, CEO Australian Research Council, Professor Melon Crossley, Dean, Faculty of Science, University of New South Wales, Mr. Robin Williams, Science Show Presenter, ABC Radio National, AusSMC Deputy Chair, and Brian Altman, Director, South Australian Museum. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science, the Honourable Christopher Pyne. The Minister, as we've heard, is sorry he's unable to join us, and it's unfortunate yet understandable. as he has been out in the mid-north viewing the devastation of the bushfires along with the Premier. It's great to join you in celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Australian Science Media Centre. Those in the business of communicating science to the general public know how challenging this can be. Given the technical and complex nature of most science matters, reporting them is not as straightforward as communicating ordinary day-to-day events and issues. However, science impacts on each and every one in Australia every day and is too important not to be communicated in a meaningful way to the public. On top of this, science and scientific discovery is of vital importance to Australia's future growth and prosperity. It is for this reason that it is a core element of the National Innovation and Science Agenda, which the government will be releasing early next month. We need to be better at explaining the importance of scientific discovery to all Australians, not just to those who subscribe to nature and science. This is what your organisation specialises in, and you should be praised for that. With the right support and the right tools for scientists, researchers and journalists, we can ensure science reporting better informs public debate and understanding. By giving journalists direct access to evidence-based science and expertise, you've become a highly valued resource for the media and science sectors. Your independent service for the news media means your advice and support as a key player in the science communication sector will continue to be sought. The Australian Government is pleased to be able to support your efforts. Through the Inspiring Australia program, the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science since 2013 has had a 3-year funding agreement with AusSMC as a foundation sponsor. Also through Inspiring Australia, the Government has for more than 5 years given AusSMC funding to coordinate the Science and the Media Expert Working Group, as well as implement some of the recommendations of that group. This includes the delivery of the Science Media Exchange, or SciMex, and the Scientist in Residence program. Through SciMex, much better online resources and tools are provided for working journalists to enable more efficient and accurate reporting of science in the media. This can be in the form of an up-to-date science news feed, alerts on embargoed stories, a database of scientific experts, or in-depth backgrounders and explanations of some complex scientific issues. It could also be in the form of stories being pitched by researchers or a library of multimedia that can be used to illustrate and explain stories. I understand that 600 researchers have already created profiles on SciMex as topic experts and can pitch their own stories directly to journalists. Media officers from research institutions and industry can also upload media releases, scientific papers and multimedia directly to the site for the 1,300 registered journalists to use. I'm also pleased that the CSIRO has supported AusSMC in its Science Media Savvy initiative, a series of online resources and short videos to help scientists perform better in the media, be it at interviews or when communicating via social media. Finally, I'd like to thank AusSMC for their leadership role in science engagement in Australia, as evidenced by their participation in the Science Sector Group, the forum of non-government bodies supporting the Inspiring Australia initiative. I'd also like to acknowledge the important role Baroness Greenfield played in exporting the Science Media Centre model from England to Australia. I'm delighted to hear there is a growing international network of science media centres. I hope the next 10 years will bring AusSMC even more success in supporting the media, scientists and researchers to better inform Australians on science issues. Thank you.
Convey our best wishes to Minister Pyne for those very kind words, and also just thank you to you. I think he got about 10 minutes notice before you gave his speech, so thank you for that. We'd also take this opportunity to thank the Department for the support for the Centre and, as you mentioned, some of our major projects such as SciMex and Scientists in Residence. I would now like to invite the Minister for Education, the Honourable Susan Close, to say a few words. The South Australian Government has been a long-term supporter of the Australian Science Media Centre since its inception, and we are very grateful for the South Australian Government's support. The Premier, Jay Weatherill, sits on our board and tonight is visiting the areas devastated by bushfires, as I mentioned. We are delighted that Minister Close was able to join us. Minister, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, and you're not half as delighted as I am to be able to do this. I was really pleased when I received the text inviting me to take Premier Weatherill's place tonight. A big science freak-out type, I think, is the technical term. I'd like to start just by reminding us of why science information, media, education matters. And of course, the first element is simply content. It's about making sure that the right information, accurate information, is provided through our many media channels. And we know that media, above all, is hungry for content. And when scientists are in a position to provide that simply in language that's able to be understood and very speedily, then the media will use it. And the Centre has been magnificent in providing that content. And never more has it been needed than in recent years, as we have been dealing above all with climate change and getting people to understand what it means now, what it means in the future, and what it means that we need to do differently. But also about the looming issues of the loss of biodiversity and then all the consequent changes that we need to make in how we operate, how we do everything that we've been used to doing for so long. The second element, I think, after content is method. Understanding what the scientific method means. I remember, I think I was still at university when I came across the book by Carl Sagan, Science as a Candle in the Dark, and the idea that a scientific approach could make such a difference in how we understand the world around us, and it can replace superstition, it can replace mythology, in understanding clearly what the problems are before us and how we approach them. And not everyone's going to get a science degree. So unless we're able to have scientists who can explain the scientific method and then apply that, then we're not going to change the views of the population. They're not going to be equipped with that information, that approach. The third reason, and there are actually four, usually in order to maintain my rule of not reading, I limit myself to three, but there are four. So I'm up to number three. Help me. So number three is that we need people to be better at science for our economy. So I'm the Minister for Education, we need the kids who are pretty good at maths and science to be great at maths and science, and we need every child to be numerate and scientifically literate. We know that we need this because we are not an economy that can afford to have people who simply stand in a row making things. We have to have people who can design those things, and we have to do that in the context of climate change and all the changes in technology and energy that entails. So we need the new population, the kids who are at school today, the kids who are at university today, to be better at science even than we were. The fourth reason, though, that science matters, and the reason I've added it in, is it's really fun. Science is fantastic. Robin Williams is one of my absolute heroes in the entire world because he made science interesting and fun. And every Saturday we could put on the radio show and find out more about this incredible world that we live in. And I thank you, Robin, for everything you've always done and continue to do. But the fun science thing really matters. It kind of links to those other three as well. But the beauty of science is it isn't a terrible chore that needs to be explained in great detail, the way I sometimes feel about mathematics. Because science is interesting. Science is about the world. And I think the most fun I've had this year, it's been a pretty difficult year, was reading The Martian and having my 13-year-old boy read it concurrently. So sometimes I read to him, we still really enjoy reading together, and sometimes I'll say, I am reading the most fantastic book, you need to read it. And then we share this incredibly science-rich but really exciting book. So the fun of science is one of its great joys and makes it so much easier to communicate, and the job of the Media Science Centre so much easier to do. So that's why I think science matters. Why has this extraordinary centre been born here, admittedly in other countries as well? I know the UK did it first. Well, part of the reason is that we're an incredibly scientifically literate and well-educated state. We have three extraordinarily strong universities, public universities, that have done a very good job for a very long time and produced a lot of graduates with good degrees in science. Even I myself, with my arts degree, wove in 2 years of biology because I liked it, I was interested in it, and Flinders University let you do that. So we have got a very strong intellectual base, intellectual capital sitting in this state. And then, of course, we had Premier Mike Rann, who met Baroness Susan Greenfield, and so the idea of our doing this and hosting this for Australia was born. 10 years ago, and what a wonderful celebration to have. I'm very proud of the role that my state has played, and I'm very impressed at the role that the Centre has managed to play for the last 10 years. Contributions to something like 90,000 journals and pieces of news items. What an extraordinary effort. Links to countries all across the world, obviously starting with the UK, but also Japan and other countries. So what is happening here is special and really important. And if that's not something to celebrate, I don't know what is. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister Close, for your very stimulating and highly relevant speech. Thank you for being here. I'd now like to give you my personal perspective on this amazing 10-year journey with the Australian Science Media Centre. But before I do, I'd like to beam in one of our earliest supporters, which was actually Fairfax Media along with News Corp, but particularly Fairfax Media Mark Scott, who then, while he was on our board, which is why he should serve on the AusSMC board, became the CEO of the ABC. And in fact, it was Mark and Robin and I who formed the original selection committee for the CEO. I'd like to now introduce Mark Scott.
Hi, it's Mark Scott here at the ABC. Sorry I can't be with you to celebrate 10 years of the Australian Science Media Centre. I remember when Peter Yates first came and shared with me the idea of creating the centre, and we understood the important role it could play in Australian public life and Australian journalism and Australian science. And it's met all those ambitions and more. One of my contributions as an early board director was helping to select Susanna Elliott as the director of the centre, and that was one of the best decisions we ever made. Congratulations, Peter. Congratulations, Susanna. And may the great work of the Australian Science Media Centre continue for decades to come.
Thank you, Mark Scott. Thank you very much indeed for those kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, we celebrate 10 years of the Australian Science Media Centre because Baroness Susan Greenfield, one of the world's great science communicators and scientists, identified both a problem and a solution. The problem is science as an information genre has a structure that generally inhibits its dissemination into mainstream media, and that problem is made worse as it has traditionally been delivered by the science industry itself. Now, quacks and folktales do quite well. The science industry actually didn't go that well. And the problem is if you are not in mainstream media, you're probably not in the mainstream culture. Baroness Susan Greenfield's solution was to set up an independent, not-for-profit national press gallery that materially reduced the cost to the media of accessing science content and significantly enhancing the accessibility of that content to mainstream public. Now, you don't need to be a business genius to work out that with such an important information genre that the public is so hungry for, called science, that if you dramatically reduce the cost of production and increase its ease of appeal and its ease of access, which is also known as appeal, you will get a lot more of it into the hands of our cultural gatekeepers, the media. And with more evidence-based science in the hands of our cultural gatekeepers, the benefit to our society is very large. I met Susan Greenfield almost 13 years ago when she was here as Mike Rand's thinker in residence, and she made this point to me. And having spent several years in the media industry as CEO of Kerry Packers Publishing and Broadcasting Limited, with one of the assets I was responsible for, I knew the problem very well. And so did Mike Rand. And I'm just so very grateful to the early media partners, business persons and governments who got the problem, understood it and encouraged Mike, Susan and I to found the Australian Science Media Centre. Now, our original offices were actually in the old gunpowder storeroom over near the museum, and to everyone's surprise, we did not blow up. Now, that was most likely due to the stable and clever guidance of our brilliant CEO, Susanna Elliott, and the team, and please give them a big round of applause. The reality is that before the Australian Science Media Centre or the Science Media Centre in the UK, most science content was pushed onto the public by the science industry, extorting a confused public to listen hard. Please, listen hard. And as the public's ears closed, the shrill claims by industry and scientists of extraordinary new discoveries became even louder. And so, I believe, a negative cycle was created. And then the digital revolution, including internet, social media, etc., hit the media industry, crushing their revenues and leading to a mass exodus of specialist journalists. By the time in late 2010, fortunately, we were well established with a low-cost model for delivering the science genre in an accessible way. Let me put it to you that science as an information genre in mainstream media still did suffer, but consider what would have happened otherwise without the Australian Science Media Centre. The traditional specialist science journalist base was gutted by the media revenue route, and yet science reporting was not. Sometimes I'm asked the question, so why don't we see more science? My answer is, have you thought about why we don't see so much less science? Australia now has a science press gallery that now delivers the greatest amount of science content at the lowest possible cost with the maximum ease of access. And I think our numbers show that. Just to repeat that, since we were established, we've produced over 90,000 media articles. We have an audience reach of 8 million Australians a month. Last September, or just this September recently, we did a quick poll. 50% of all the evidence-based science in our media and our internet media and our social media here in Australia was sourced from the third floor of this building called the Australian Science Media Centre. We have 1,500 journalists who are connected into here. Many of them are watching here tonight. And we have 4,000 scientists with whom we work on a daily, monthly, regular basis. So I believe we have successfully completed stage one of the mission set by Susan Greenfield. But for those of you who know the Baroness, mission one is normally just the warm-up act. So stage two is to change the cultural paradigm of science and innovation in our society. Just as Paul Keating changed the cultural relationship between Australia and Asia, we are committed to changing the cultural paradigm within our country between science and innovation. It should be as obvious to you to study maths or science as it is any other subject, arts, communications, whatever. My wife, a teacher in a Melbourne girls' school, often reminds me that girls don't pick arts subjects because they think they're going to get well paid. So why don't they pick science subjects? The argument is because they're concerned they're not going to get well paid is not truthful. It's something else. The collective object of the Australian Science Media Centre and the RIOS is to play a central role in that cultural shift. And both of our boards and both of our organisations are committed to playing our role. Our new Prime Minister Turnbull gives us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to pull that off, and in 10 years' time, we will celebrate our contribution to that cultural shift. Last but not least, I'd like to acknowledge those organisations and people who've got behind the centre and supported the organisation from its early days. We've had a wonderful board, well represented here tonight, and two fantastic deputy chairmen, both of here, Robin Williams and Merlin Crossley. What the Australian Science Media Centre has and will go on to achieve in the future with projects like SciMex, etc., would not be possible without all of our foundation sponsors. Now, I'd like to take the moment to acknowledge our sponsors, and fortunately we have so many that if I was to read them all out, it would take a long time. They should be up on our screen here. Please give them a big round of applause, and our affiliates. When we started out, we had about a dozen supporting organisations. Now we have more than 70. So throughout the evening, we're going to be celebrating each of our sponsors. And can I say to all of you, all of our sponsors who are here tonight, some of them have been here forever. By the way, just to put the numbers into context, since we opened our doors, we have raised $8 million to support the activities of the revenue of the Australian Science Media Centre. $8 million has come from organisations, companies, media companies, industry, government, universities, because they believe in this cause, and we want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. And they also want to celebrate with you, and on your way out is the birthday party. There's a party bag, so don't forget to take it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in our special celebration. I'm now going to ask you to welcome our national treasure and ABC broadcaster, Robin Williams, who will lead a discussion on the big cultural shift. But as they come to the stage, enjoy this video footage from Honourable Mike Rann. He's obviously in Italy, couldn't be here, but he wanted to be here. Over to you, Mike. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Greetings from Rome. I'm delighted to take part on the other side of the world in this celebration of 10 years of AusSMC. If you think about it, back in 2002, 2003, Susan Greenfield, one of our thinkers in residence, during her residency came to see me and said, look, I think there's a great opportunity to do something really special, to establish a national centre for the whole of Australia based in Adelaide, the RI-Aus, to encourage science education, to improve the scientific literacy of Australians, but also to have parallel to it an Australian Science Media Centre based on the British model, but adapted to Australia's needs and circumstances. And during that 10 years, we've seen both organisations make a real contribution nationally. AusSMC has produced tens of thousands of stories, sourced from nearly 4,000 scientists, plugged into 1,000 journalists and media organisations, and they've covered every kind of issues, from bushfires to earthquakes to stem cell research to nuclear power and climate change. So journalists know that when they're dealing with the AusSMC, they're getting top-flight scientific advice rather than advice from lobby groups, but they're also getting something that's independent, not-for-profit, and that's why it works. So congratulations to Dr. Susanna Elliott, done a brilliant job of leading a terrific team. Congratulations to the board and to the Science Advisory Council, and also, of course, to Chairman Peter Yates, who's chaired both RI-Aus and AusSMC. Has done a brilliant job. Well done, Peter. Well done to everyone, and congratulations on a great 10 years. Arrivederci.